Hello guys, all right, so I'm gonna do a quick reconstruction of this layout and kind of walk you through some of that creation process as I went about creating this layout. So for the first step, of course, is to design your layout, and I'll go through which designer templates I used, and then I'll replace them with the patterns paper that I used as well. So to start off with, I used Paisley Place 2A, 2B on this layout, and I did a cross design, so where the borders just go straight across. On top of that, I used Made with Love, the 3 of 3, the maple leaf here, the big fun one, and we're gonna do some really fun things with that. And Autumn, so Autumn 3 and 4. And then the a la carte Harvest. I love that pumpkin, and I wanted to use it with this layout. Anytime I get a chance to do a cute little fall pumpkin, I take advantage of that. So we're gonna poke it out here. And then Made with Love number 1. These came from the same Kiwi Club kit. These come from Autumn, and this one is from Harvest. On top of that, we have a 4x4 photo here, 2 4x6s. If you want to add more photos, a great option is to do 2 3x4s and 2 3x4s in replace of the 2 4x6s. Another 4x4 here, which we're actually not going to use as a photo. I'm going to place a title card there. That's where our kind of like meaningful, sentimental title will come into play. And then 2 2x2, so some small little photos here with the Made with Love 1 of 3 little banner tag there. So this is kind of the first design part, and then now we're going to go ahead and I traced and cut the papers out, starting with my borders. I always usually, like 90% of the time, I start with my borders, and I pick one of the patterns, the main patterns as we refer to them, that have a little bit more pattern to them. And so I chose this acorn pattern. It was subtle but cute, and just kind of what I was hoping to kind of, because I knew I was using this maple, this larger piece. I wanted something a little bit more subtle in the patterns so that the page didn't get too busy or too overwhelming. Now, one thing I do want to point out on the borders, of course, I wanted them to align because we're doing a straight cross, but I went ahead and I trimmed down the piece a little bit. So when I went to go trace these out of my paper, for example, I didn't do the full width. So I started with just lining this up on the edge. Say this was our paper, and then I adjusted it, and then only trimmed out a portion of that width. So then, of course, you can replace that here on your page. And again, that's Paisley Place 2A, 2B. Okay. All right, so after that, I did pull in a brown cardstock, and I decided to cut the maple leaf out of the brown cardstock. And then I used the stencils, which are so fun. You can add different patterns and colors in there. And I decided to do a mixture. I decided to add some with my photos. So of course, taking, like, for example, a photo, lining it up, and then tracing, well, I had to see which ones would fit inside of those spaces. Like, for example, if I wanted to fit this photo in there, which gets all their faces, and then I just used a white pen and traced that out, and then I cut the piece out. And I did add some pop-up to each of those pieces, even the photos, and then took the white pen again, and I doodled around the edges just because it pops so nice on that brown cardstock. And then wrap some twine around here on the little branch thing here. And then tied a little bow, and then tied a bow around the center of that, like you can see here, and then finished it off. So I added pop-up to the back of the maple and to the top layers. It's still not too thick, so as long as, you know, you're not using crazy depth pop-up, it should be fine. And so that was, of course, kind of the first thing I started with, because one, I wanted to see how it would turn out. I was so excited to kind of play with that and see what my photos look like incorporated into those designs. And I think it could be fun to, you could even add some title cards into the mix of, you know, the different places. Or of course you could just use the full maple leaf. You don't have to cut out the stencils, but I thought it was really fun to incorporate those 5 different photos into that design. And then of course I picked a 4x4 photo that allowed space here at the top to be trimmed off, because I knew that it would overlay the picture a little bit. So when I was deciding what picture, I kept that in mind. And luckily I had one. So for example, like this photo would be harder, well, you know, like unless it was, I can't trim it down to 4x4, but people's head would get cut off. So again, being mindful of kind of what picture where, even when you have places for photos, like which picture is perfect for which spot. And I don't really usually know that until I start going through it, and I just, again, kind of keep in consideration what's surrounding the photos. Okay, so then I added the rest of my photos before I went on to my other, tracing my other designs out, just because I wanted to make sure that the photos would all work. And in my case, they did. So that was really nice. So I added my 2 4x6s here, didn't even trim those down. I had printed this one like so on one sheet when I printed it from my selfie printer. And so I just kept those together. You could trim apart them, but I just decided to keep those together like so. And we have a video tutorial over on the blog. If you go search selfie canon on our blog, put selfie canon, you'll see the blog article that I kind of walk through how you can collage it and adjust your pictures so they're not all printed in 4x6s, which I've done often. All right, and then I knew I was going to use this title card. I loved how it talked about families. We had these family pictures, and so I wanted to keep that in the forefront as well. So this gives it a nice little focal point here on the page. And then I just kind of centered those little mini photos around that. After that, I, of course, decided to trace out a portion of the pumpkin. Now I did have a little bit of scraps left over from my 12x12 cardstock that I cut this out of, and I will put at the end of this video little cutting tips on the maple, so stay tuned for that. I'll share that at the end of this process video. But you can see I didn't trace out the whole pumpkin because I knew that it would be tucked in. So I used the scraps that I had, and then I just kind of knew that that was going to be tucked in there on that. And then as far as using the stencil, in this case on the pumpkin, which also has a stencil feature, I took my scraps of paper, and then of course I just laid the stencils on top, traced it out, cut it out, and then layered it on top of the brown cardstock. Now I wanted to balance, of course, the brown, so that's kind of why I decided to do the outer edge of the pumpkin, in this case brown. I also loved how the dark brown popped off the background. And then I accentuated it with some orange as the layers here. And then, now that I put some orange over here, I needed to balance it back to the left side. So I decided to trace a leaf, the autumn number 3, out of the orange paper as well. And so, of course, I just laid that up on your paper, scraps of paper, trace, cut it out, replace. And then I was like, you know what, it could be really cute with 2. So then at that moment I decided, well, what can I cut another one out? I love the plaid. So I decided to go ahead and pull the plaid down here and do 2 maple leaves kind of clustered together. I did take the time to do a little bit of a top stitch. And so what I did here is I trace and cut the leaf out, and then I took my poker and I carefully poked around the edges of my leaves. So that took a moment, you know, about 5 minutes to do that. So when I say moments, minutes. And then I just took my needle and thread here. And then of course I did a top stitch. So for those of you that don't know necessarily top stitch, I'll just go over it really quickly. So when you go through a top stitch, so once you make all your holes, so for example, I would go down on my hole or up on my hole, and you'll see here that I just kept a piece of the back. So let me try to demonstrate this. So I kept a piece in the back. I went down the first hole, and then you wrap it back around, and then you go down again, and then you wrap it back around, and it just kind of does this edging stitch along the whole thing. So you just kind of keep going from top, down, through each hole. Well, then of course, when you get to the last one, you go top down, and then I tied the 2 ends together. All right, so little detail there, which was just fun. It was, of course, I was inspired by the sketch, which kind of by the kit itself, because it has this kind of stitching theme. And then that just motivated me to be like, you know what, I'm gonna do some quick stitching. And so I put on a movie and I did the holes, and then I just sat there and stitched for a good 15 minutes, I think is kind of where it took me to do both of those. So for the most part though, I really love how they turned out. It's really fun, and the structure and the texture of it is really fun. I love texture with fall elements. And so of course, whether you're adding twine or thread or other fun little elements like that, it's always super fun. I also had these in my stash. They're like little felt leaves that I picked up, oh gosh, years ago. I don't even know where they were in my stash that I had. And so I decided to go ahead and throw those in here. Now I will say you can use autumn #1 if you want to cut something similar to size. So I just did 2 of those, the felts, and then again, going back to the texture comment, I think the little button will give it a nice little finished touch on that side. So same thing over here. I wanted to add some texture, so I went through my stash, found this little cute ribbon that I've had, again, probably for years, and pulled that in. The brown just popped out, you know, of course, inspired by this like dark brown. It's so pretty. Added the Fall is Cozier with You title from the Kiwi Club kit. And then I'm gonna add a little twine here on the pumpkin. Again, just kind of balancing it where you see opportunities to balance or add the same techniques that you maybe were inspired on the other side to the left or the right of your page, and it gives it a nice cohesive, balanced look, which is always really fun. And then basically that's it. That's the finished result here. And if you wanted to add a button, I was debating it back and forth, to tell you the truth. I was like, should I add a button here with the ribbon there? Which is really cute too. Again, balancing them. I just did a tied that on this one. So I'm gonna probably do some pop-up to balance the thickness there, to balance it back out. So I'm just gonna do it on both sides of that knot so that it lays flat when I adhere it down and stick it to the page. Guys, I think that's it. That was the basic concept of this layout. And of course, now I'm just gonna adhere all of my elements down. But the page overall was super fun, and I really enjoyed working with the fall paper. It really gave me that same fall, what fall does for us, comforts us, you know, I don't know, just relaxes you and rejuvenates you and renews you. I know fall does that for me. So when I scrapbook or when I embrace myself, immerse myself into some fall memories, even if they're years previous, all those same feelings and joys come back. And I definitely felt it with the time that I had made the time to create this specific page. And it came together pretty fast. So I hope that it inspires you. Like always, we'd love to see what you create. So share it with us in the community. Use hashtag Create with Kiwi Lane for a chance to win our monthly giveaways. And of course, we just love to celebrate what you create with you. So share it with us so that we can be inspired by you. But I hope this video has inspired you. And until next time, keep playing to create. Bye now.